So what I was hoping that we could do just to start briefly, especially since I haven't officially met all of you, is that we could just do a quick check-in. You can just say one or two words, whatever you're comfortable with, just how you're doing. At this point, the spring semester, it always blows my mind how fast it goes, how hard it is to keep up. So really just how you're doing. And then my class, I think Diana as well in your section, but we're really big on self-care, right? So I also just want to ask, what are you going to do to care for yourself this week? So I'll pop those questions into the chat, but as always, when you check in, feel free to say whatever you like. You can completely ignore the questions, but it's generally, how are you doing? And what's one thing you'll do to care for yourself? So there. So I'm happy to just call out folks. You can always pass if you're not ready to share. Pablo and Miku.
Who, me first? Okay. Yeah, I'm Miku, not Pablo. So I'm doing pretty well this morning. Actually, kind of tired because there was a fire alarm that went off in this building last night, which was annoying. But I got coffee this morning, and that's really nice. And I think I'll do that again to take care of myself in the future.
Awesome, thank you. And Pablo, and sorry, I don't mean to treat you as one person, even though you share a screen.
No, it's okay. Yeah, how am I doing? Similar to Miku, a little tired, a little foggy, but I have my oatmeal right here, so I'm gonna start eating that. And one thing I'll do to take care of myself. Yeah, I think going outside. I feel like I've been doing that, and that's been good. So just keep going outside.
Sweet. Thank you and welcome. Molly, how are you? Welcome.
Hi, I'm Molly. I'm also doing pretty well and also in the same boat of being tired because of the fire alarm. And in terms of self-care, I think I agree with Pablo. I think especially with online class, I forget to go outside sometimes, so it's important for me to go outside. And I did that yesterday, so I'll try and keep this streak up.
Awesome, thank you. Chandi, I see you have hand, so let's pop over to you.
Hello, I'm Shandi, and I'm doing pretty well this morning. A little bit tired, but I'm getting through it. One thing, let me see, what was the question? What's one thing you would do to take care for yourself this week? Just eating well, eating better, and getting a lot of fluids in, getting a lot of sleep, and just re-instructing my body.
That sounds wonderful. I may take inspiration from you, so thanks. Nathan, how are you?
I'm doing well, thanks. I appreciate you asking. I was fortunate enough to go climbing just yesterday, just last weekend, and didn't do as well as I would have liked and got banged up a bit. So my self-care piece is definitely going to be kind of resting, relaxing, and trying to prepare for the next trip while not engaging in unnecessary negative self-talk about my performance. So it's kind of like a two-prong one for me.
That is sweet. And congrats on your courageousness in climbing as well. Diana, how are you? You are next in my list.
All right. I'm good. I'm feeling really ready to get outside of the Zoom box and get more outside and have a chance to see folks and interact a little bit in person. I'm still an introvert, so there's part of it that part of the distance that appeals to me, but I also really do enjoy one-on-one conversations, small group conversations. And I always get outside to take care of myself. My son recently got into model planes or those little tiny propeller planes, and so we'll probably get outside later and do that by the Rouge Park. So I'm excited for that.
Wow, that sounds fantastic. Is he building them as well?
Putting them together. I don't know if I call it building. quite.
Heck
But
yeah, I
he's
would.
getting into that. He's getting into it, yeah.
That's wonderful. Cool hobby. Veronica, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you doing?
Good, thank you.
Yeah. I am very sunburnt right now. I'm in northern Michigan for this week, and I was never really into the lake life. So I guess I was not prepared for the sun, but that's okay. And I will definitely need a nap or two today, and I think that will really, really help me keep going. But yeah, thanks.
Absolutely. Welcome. Wonderful. And I love the trees we can see through your window. Thank you for sharing Northern Michigan with all of us. Annie, how are you?
Good morning. I'm good. I'm all right. I'm pretty tired. My roommate had to wake me up this morning because of the whole thing. I slept. But last week was great. So I got to walk around a lot, but I missed a few days of the gym. I'm kind of beating myself up about that. So I think going forward this week, I'm going to be more consistent about going. Yeah. Morning.
Good morning. Kate and Anya, how are you both individually?
I'm doing well. Fire alarm got us too at 5 a.m. So I think we're both a little tired. But yeah, overall I'm doing well. And yesterday I called my family for a really long time, which was super nice. And I plan on just keeping in touch with them a little bit closer this week.
Yeah, same. I'm doing pretty well. I fell back asleep after the fire alarm and I was planning to get more work done this morning than I actually ended up doing, but it's still okay. I'm also very sunburnt, Veronica. I'm gonna, yeah, just, I think for self-care this week, I need to text my grandma back. And then there's a bakery that I really want to go to. So that's my plan.
That sounds fantastic. And I feel kind of inspired that this is like the best title of a poem ever for self-care this week. I'm going to text my grandma back. I think seriously, like that is a fantastic line. So thank you, Anya, for sharing that. Natalie, welcome. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. I'm doing well. I had a really busy weekend somehow. I went rafting with my friends, which was super fun. If any of you guys in Ann Arbor have ever done that, highly recommend. For self-care this week, probably also get outside. I want to go for a bike ride. I recently got my bike up here. So I'm going to go for a bike ride, maybe a walk with friends, and yeah, just experience the crazy heat and nice weather.
Wonderful. Dari, how are you?
Yeah, also pretty tired from the alarm. I was up since then and ate breakfast, but now I'm feeling like a second breakfast is needed. And something that I could do, like take more walks outside for sure.
Wonderful. I am so digging second breakfast. Like since I've had children, and sorry if this is TMI, but breastfeeding, like second breakfast is like an absolute necessity. So I feel that, Dari. Thank you. Gigi, how are you?
I'm doing pretty well. Definitely fire alarm fogginess going on, but I have been doing some laundry this morning, which is good for everyone. So this is awesome. And this week, I think I'm liking this eating theme. I think I'm gonna try and get some green stuff in my body, some veggies, some greens. I think that's necessary. So.
Awesome. Thank you, Gigi. Eva and Emily, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. Do you want to go first?
Yeah. Similar to what everyone else has been saying, the fire alarm was interesting. I was actually like having a bad dream. So when it went off, I thought I was like in the middle of an apocalypse or something. So it took me a while to get my bearings. So that was an interesting start to my morning, but overall it's been pretty good. Something I did for self-care this week is I did like a paint by numbers, which was really relaxing.
Awesome. Thank you.
I'm doing good. I spent a lot of time outside this weekend with some friends and family, but I have a lot of allergies. So It's been kind of rough out here. But something I'm gonna do, I think I'm gonna try to cook for myself a little healthier this week, a little better. I have some cabbage I'm excited to make, and what else do I have? I just have like veggies I need to use up. So I'm excited to eat healthy.
Fantastic. Rushi, good morning. How are you?
I'm good. Well, I'm tired. And I really enjoyed some of the stuff that happened over the weekend, like biking around, seeing more places around the city. So overall, I'm doing pretty well. And for self-care, I want to eat good food this week, which I know me and Eva have a plan to go and eat good food out and also go outside.
Wonderful. Hannah, good morning. How are you?
I'm doing well. I spent the weekend just relaxing and going outside, and I went grocery shopping, and so I'm looking forward to like use them up and cook as well.
Thank you. Welcome. Matt, how are you doing? We can circle back.
Hi,
Oh,
doing well.
okay,
Sorry.
good. Well, no
Took a while
problem.
on mute. Doing well. Tired. Ate some watermelon last night. That's about it.
It's a pretty good not it. So Josie, how are you?
Yeah, I'm doing all right. I'm actually really happy right now, a bit tired, a little stressed about the end of the semester because, like you said, it goes really fast. But my sister and I just drove back to Michigan this weekend from North Carolina, and I'm really looking forward to seeing two of my best friends after not seeing them for a while because they're coming back this week.
Mm-hmm. Jesse, welcome. Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing good, and good morning to you. I'm a little tired today. I literally woke up at like 10 o'clock, so we made the coffee, I got settled in, we turned the camera on, we're here, present. But that's something I've been trying to do for self-care as well, is just be more present. Just taking like a few moments throughout the day to have like a mindful breath or two and just really hone in on like where I'm at and what I'm doing in today. And just try to like ground myself in that, just because the semester does go by so fast and there's so much happening with classes and school and getting ready to move and next year. It's nice just to breathe.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And actually that reminds me too, Jesse, that like, I don't know about y'all, but I am not like a morning person. And I feel like that morning fog is such an intimate space. And so I just want to say, I feel really honored to like share this intimate space with you, you know, like waking up and then like Jesse, when you said wake up and turn on the camera, like, oh my gosh, that's like awful. So thank you so much for just being here and doing that. And this is hard. So online school is hard. And I appreciate you all. So anyway, sorry, Jesse's comment just motivated me to say that. So Alyssa, welcome. How are you?
Hi, I'm getting a little bit better every day. I was hoping to get back to CCS soon, but I randomly got a fever over the weekend. So it's gone now, but it's like, okay, what does that mean? So I guess the way I've been doing self-care lately is watching movies. I've been trying to watch like LGBTQ related movies for Pride Month. Yeah, that's always good.
Wonderful. I'm glad to hear, Alyssa, that you're feeling a little bit better, even though I'm sorry that fevers suck. So hang in there. Gina, welcome. Good morning. How are you?
Hi. I'm fine. I have not had that many thoughts since also this morning, but I fell back asleep, so it was really okay. And for self-care, I'll probably do some online shopping. So I have a list of stuff I want to get.
Fantastic. All right. How about Jessica? Good morning. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing well, thank you. So I've been doing fine. I haven't been able to fall back asleep, so I've just been doing some chores around the house. And then later in the week, I guess I could do for self-care. I could do more chores because they never end. But when I do them, and and I'm just like able to rest and like I feel like accomplished, but also like the space that I'm in is also a lot cleaner. And so yeah, that's what makes me feel like accomplished and restful.
Absolutely. I feel that. Thank you. Greta, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. I'm actually visiting a friend at UCLA right now. So it is 7:20 in the morning. That's yeah, it's really fun. There's a lot of us packed into our dorm. That's why my at the moment. But it's been really fun. And because I'm here in California, something that I'm going to do this week is visit my family actually, which will be really nice to see them. And yeah.
Well, thank you again for taking time out for us. It's 7:20 in the morning in California. That says a lot. So thank you. Arthur, good morning. How are you? We can circle back, Arthur, if you're, or I can't hear you, but maybe others can. Okay, we can circle back. And Mazi, I know you just popped in. So if you are ready to share, feel free, but if not, we're just checking in how you doing this week. What's something you're doing to take care of yourself this week?
I'm doing pretty good. Something that I'm doing to take care of myself is training. That's about it. For real.
All right, wonderful. Welcome.
Thank you.
All right. Did I miss anybody? Anybody? We have such a crowd here. The whole 2-screen thing, it's like keeps me on my toes. Feel free to speak up if I missed anybody, but welcome to you all. I'm doing pretty well. I am also kind of tired today, I have to say. I have my own, I don't have a fire alarm, but I have my own little 6 a.m. baby alarm, which actually wasn't as bad as it sometimes can be, but it's still the whole jarring waking up with an alarm or screaming is not always the most pleasant way to wake up in the morning. But doing well, did some gardening this weekend, loving that. So, and I'm so excited to talk to y'all today about murals and poems. What I'd like to do is kind of hand things off to Diana at this point to get us started thinking about murals, and then we'll go from there.
Thanks so much, Darcy. And I appreciate all of you sharing a bit about yourself and how you're doing and where your energy levels are today. So I will definitely take that into consideration. I was inspired by hearing about the alarm and the apocalyptic dreams and kind of like what folks are watching and how they're taking care of themselves. Reminded of, I've always been a huge sci-fi fan, and I grew up reading comic books and reading sci-fi. And Netflix recently made one of my favorites, Sweet Tooth, into a show. So any of you that are into apocalyptic fairy tale sci-fi, I recommend it to check it out. But yeah, so thank you for sharing a little bit about you. And most of the time, like my organizing does tend to revolve around looking towards positive futures and like using creativity to think about how do we use creativity to think about imagining a new future. And I do like to do that through sci-fi. I like to do that through community organizing, and I like to do it through writing too. So my name is Diana, for those of you that may not haven't spent as much time with you all. Diana Wasa Nangokwe Seals. And I am a community organizer. I teach community organizing in the School of Social Work and with semester in Detroit. I've done community organizing in Detroit for about 20 years. And a lot of it focuses around EJ, but certainly we use a lot of art in our organizing. And I had transitioned from organizing kind of like, being, within an organization, directing an organization, and transitioned to, I was invited by one of my mentors to consider being an activist scholar. So that's what I've been, I'm working on, I'm very close to finishing my PhD, but my work is in Indigenous feminism and climate resilience and looking at climate justice. So a lot of like what I'll be talking about with the murals is a bit through my lens. And since you all have, expressed some low energy, I want you to think about this as a story time. I'm going to be sharing some images. I'm going to be sharing some thoughts. And I want you to feel free to take yourself off screen and just listen, just watch. Most of these are pictures, but I'll go ahead and share screen now. And you should be able to see that. All right, so I want to talk a bit, and this is something that I'm exploring in my PhD and kind of like as an activist scholar, but thinking about some of the modern manifestations of gentrification and colonialism, and using Eastern Market as a bit of a case study. I think it is almost impossible to say, especially when thinking about gentrification, like any one thing is all good or all bad. But I'm really inviting you through these pictures and through some of the things that I've been thinking about and that I've been reading others' writings on. I'm inviting you on a thought journey and asking you to use your own critical thinking. It's an invitation to dig deeper into Detroit's history and to sit with some cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance, if you don't know, is like the ability, the way I understand it, the inability or having difficulty in holding two or more contradictory ideas at once, which in my experience is a lot of how I experience Detroit or think about Detroit. I like the Eastern Market murals. And I say that with full recognition of my own positionality as a white appearing PhD college professor, which is not what I always was. That wasn't always my positionality of like coming up in Detroit, coming up in Lansing, going to tribal school is when I went to my undergraduate is I noticed my positionality shifting, but certainly where I am now is much different than kind of like how I came up and a lot of where my community organizing comes from. And I like the murals and recognize that they do represent oppression to others that I have fought alongside and organized with. And so that's some of the cognitive dissonance that I sit with. And my appreciation sometimes of the murals is appreciation for the artists. And this is not a critique of the artists necessarily. And I also recognize that happiness and my comfort is different than liberation. Comfort is different than liberation. We're reading a book in our class in community organizing called Joyful Militancy. I'm letting someone else into the presentation right now. And it talks about how happiness is a lot akin to your own comfort, and that what we're really seeking in community organizing is the liberation, and that our liberation, our freedom is wrapped up in the freedom of others. So like I said, even though this is somewhat of a critique of the murals, it's not a critique of the artists, and I believe the artists should be paid. And I believe that there should be art, and I think art gives us hope, and it can be used as a tremendous tool for change and for vision. The critique is more with the commission, like who commissioned the murals, and who they're, and their idea of the intended audience. So I'm going to go over a few terms. And so, this is definitely thinking about Alejandra's presentation about art as disruptor and street art. Taking all of those things in consideration, like art can be a tool for change, and art in the community can represent the neighborhood, and it can also let others know who is and who is not part of that community. So one of the terms I'll be using is gentrification, which is displacement of families, theft, evictions, colonization, Columbus syndrome, erasure of history and culture, loss of community. This is from one of a presentation that a street artist did, Antonio Cosime, that gentrification is pushing out poor people, rebranding of community, names for marketing, names for marketing names. So a good example would be Cass Corridor, which was maybe how the community thinks of it. for something that's more generic of, what's it called now?
Midtown.
Midtown. Oh my God. So
But
yeah.
I love that was like not in your brain. Like that feels like this radical act of resistance. You're like, I can't remember anything but Cass Corridor.
Yeah, hold the cognitive dissonance right now. It's a changing cultural character of community, clearing communities of poor, and who is the neighborhood now meant for. So sometimes we can see symbols of gentrification and as signs of like who is no longer welcome, who's no longer part of the community, and who is the community now for. So this is something that in areas that are becoming gentrified, street artists use this term, or I've seen it in protests or on the street, of gentrification as the new colonialism. And I also just want to point out that I've also read quite a bit from for example, from savage feminism, and an author calls himself the last real Indian, that this term also, gentrification, is the new colonialism. They don't use that, or they don't appreciate that terminology because it suggests that colonialism has ended, but they rather see colonialism or gentrification as a symptom or the continuation of colonialism, and it's continuously morphing as systemic racism, or continuously morphing as a way of oppressing others. This is from one of my mentors, Kyle Powles White, who's actually the chair of my PhD committee. And he wrote an article on settler colonialism and gentrification and environmental justice. He refers to settler colonialism as a form of domination that violently disrupts human relationships with the environment. Settler colonialism is ecological domination, committing environmental injustice against indigenous people and other groups. When examined ecologically, settler colonialism works strategically to undermine indigenous people's social resilience, determining collectives. So I think this piece around self-determination is particularly relevant to how we think about Detroit and the ways in which Detroit is changing. It's important to note and to look further into the ways in which communities have worked to build their own space, their own neighborhood, and how that has been trampled down, either by the state government, federal government, corporations, when folks, especially Black population, African-American population in Detroit, has created Paradise Valley or African Town or a variety of other initiatives that started doing well. There have been a number of blowbacks, so that was not allowed to, that kind of booming or that kind of prosperity was disinvested from. Some would even call it sanctions, corporations moving away when there was Black African-American leadership. Closing of businesses, political like forces against that. So just recognizing that there have been a number of ways in which the city of Detroit communities have created these beautiful, beautiful economies, beautiful communities, beautiful ways of being that then highways have been put through, or they've been disinvested from, or businesses have moved out of there as a way of sanctions or of not supporting that. So in contrast to the ways in which there have been community, I guess, self-determination, like how there's been community developments, these more corporate developments are a stark contrast to what's happening. So it's not as though Detroit is now rising up. It's now that there has more corporate backers. So a lot of what you're seeing happening is happening because of Quicken Loans or because of Little Caesars Pizza or different franchises that are now investing in a particular way of being. And so kind of thinking about who is that Detroit for and what spaces feel comfortable. And if you feel comfortable in a space, to question it or to think about, why do I feel comfortable here? or do I not feel comfortable? And where is my privilege or oppression showing in that space? So this is an example of street art. Opportunity Detroit, which was Quicken Loans, which is Bedrock, this Opportunity Detroit was showing up everywhere. And street artists went around and put Gentrify Detroit. It kind of like as an education. Like this isn't necessarily what the community was asking for, but it was being placed and had a particular audience in mind. Eastern Market murals and the investment that's kind of pouring into Eastern Market happened at the same time, around 2011, 2010, when Detroit Future City was being rolled out. Again, this is another slide that Antonio was using around gentrification and settler colonialism. But this is also this one is particularly from the Detroit Free Press. You can also see some really great maps from the project that We the People of Detroit. They've done a lot of overlays of maps of Detroit Future City and where the water shutoffs are happening. So where investment is happening in other areas, you can see that there's also decommissioning in some areas, like taking money away from and then putting money into different places. And this Eastern, the murals, as well as a number of other projects were places of like where they are pouring money into and commissioning projects to happen where other communities and neighborhoods felt themselves being sucked away, like services being shut off, water being shut off, less street lights. When this was rolled out, it was not a community effort. And I just want to put that in stark contrast to the cluster study that happened 25 years prior to the Detroit Future City project, where the cluster studies was like block by block, neighborhoods were planning on what they wanted to see. This was under Coleman Young, the best mayor of Detroit. And that was, was asking people, what do they want to see? It didn't have financial or corporate backing. So that's one hypothesis as to why it didn't have, why it didn't go anywhere. But this one with foundation and corporate backing has seen a lot of traction. But I participated in community quote unquote community engagement meetings where we were given clickers and they said, do you like nice things? Yes or no? I mean, those were basically the gist of some of those questions. And there was a lot of panic that happened as these were being rolled out. People saw maps with fountains placed upon where their grandmother's house was. We did a People's Movement Assembly around what's happening with Detroit Future Cities, and the number of folks that showed up for it was way beyond what we thought. There was just a lack of information, a lack of feeling of voice. So just putting that into context of some of what you see happening roll out in the city of Detroit. Also, Detroit Future City came out a little bit earlier than the city had planned it to. And one belief is because there was a huge community action in 2010. 25,000 activists, 25,000 activists, 25, yeah. It came from around the country for the US Social Forum that happened in Detroit. There were a number of community actions in terms of investment and work in community gardens, in solar panel projects. There were like so many different projects happening during the forum, and a lot of conversation about what does Detroit want to see happen in our own community? How can we build alliances with people across the country? And then it was like a heavy hand right after the social forum happened that a lot of this future city planning was rolled out. So one of the artists, some artists, of course, that come from that are in the mural projects, they're definitely from Detroit, and they're some of them have roots as street artists, some of them have roots as as like gallery artists. But a lot of the murals that were being commissioned weren't necessarily welcomed by other street artists. Like it was seen as like bringing some of the artside artists as infringing upon their territory or placing like a sign that this is for a particular audience. So this is the Hygienic Dress League, they're part of Playground Detroit, which I think is just a terribly named collective for artists to call it Playground Detroit, because it's not this idea. I mean, it just definitely plays into this idea of like the blank canvas or the manifest destiny, that just go out and do to this space as you see fit, or that it's that other people's suffering is your playground is not my favorite. I think it's a harmful narrative. So I'm going to ask all of you to, I think I need to take it off stop share so you can do a chat, but I want to do a Zoom Bloom, which is, I want you to think about this question. So how is territory marked, or how, specifically by art? How have you seen art being used or territory being marked to let you know, oh, this is this neighborhood, or this was where these people came to? So what was a way in which you can think of art being used to mark territory? So, think names on buildings, flag on the moon, that type of thing. So take a minute to think about it. And then in the chat, can we see the chat? I think so. So in the chat, I would like you to write your thought of like, how is territory marked? I'm sharing an article too right now with you all that's from The Ringer, which was around the mural economy in Detroit. And it looks at the difference between street art and the mural economy. So go ahead and write in the chat right now, how is territory marked? And it doesn't have to be, but if you can think of an example of art, excellent. So go ahead and put that in there, and whenever you're ready, go ahead and hit enter. Graffiti tags, billboards on highways. Great. Welcome signs. The claws sculpture, the Mickey Mouse looking characters, flags. Let's take that one. Logos on buildings or fences, definitely art, I would say. Street names. Yeah, so who the streets are named after, for sure. Neighborhood watch signs. Signs when entering certain states, cities, and neighborhoods, absolutely. So the naming of places. Statues celebrating previous residents. Yes. Gates. Yep. Absolutely. This is or is not for you, whether you have a key or not, right? A lot of, quote unquote community gardens have gates. There's one in Midtown. Entry codes, yes, or entry codes, key or entry codes, yep. Abandoned buildings spray painting with the words, this house is being watched, yep, to deter squatters, absolutely. Neighborhood signs. Great. Very good examples, perfect examples, I would say. So I'm going to go with to start, this idea of statues too. So statues certainly are a way in which art is used to say whose territory it is, who founded it, or to create a new narrative or a new native to that land by using statues. So this is Christopher Columbus. This statue was by the People Mover, I think off of where Gratiot is. It's no longer there because art was also used to reclaim the space. So this is an example of like, this is actually where it was. And then a couple artists that actually were charged with felonies did the second art installation of the axe in Christopher Columbus's head. And then when it was removed, it was reclaimed by, this is a fancy shawl dancer and 3 jingle dress dancers. I just saw that she is wearing sneakers. I love that. All right. And this is a significant act of resilience using art or reclaiming space, and a reminder of the land that it's on by, I would say specifically using Indigenous women. The fancy shawl is often used during entry into a powwow, and then jingle dresses are healing. So the jingle dress came out of after World War II, and it was to as a healing dance after after the Spanish influenza. So it was actually after a similar thing that we have just gone through, and with the virus, and of how we can heal ourselves and heal the earth through art, through expression, through dance. And the jingles are actually like seeds, so planting a new way of being and into health. All right. So a couple of the artists that you'll see are like Dabble. So this is that's one of the murals that you'll see there. You know, a longtime Detroit artist, uses a lot of African spirituality in his work. Another is Tyree Guyden, and this is also in the Eastern Market. And I am reminded of one time when we were doing a tour around the city of Detroit. I think it was with the Center for Whole Communities, and Adrienne Marie Brown, who's an author and an activist, she had recently moved to Detroit, and she was explaining to everyone how everyone in Detroit loves Tyree Guyden, loves the Heidelberg Project. And several of us were there like, that's not actually the case. Many folks actually don't see it as an eyesore. Someone had put like the example of using this house is being watched. So he had started with the circles as a way of saying this house is being watched, as a way of, because he was tired of the drug dealers that were in his neighborhood and would call out houses by those spots, was one of the ways that he explains that it first starts. But that was not seen as a beautiful piece of environmental art by everyone. And in fact, his neighbor had taken him on the Oprah Winfrey Show as the world's worst neighbor. And they were on the Oprah Winfrey Show because it wasn't necessarily, like I would say, the best example of organizing. Not all neighbors were necessarily in on the art project. And a great example of community organizing, I would say, is the Oakland Garden, where she goes around and she talks to all the neighbors and talks to them about what they would like to see. So it's just, I love it. Again, kind of like showing my positionality. I've always really appreciated the Heidelberg Project, but recognizing that it's not for everyone, and it may not feel inclusive. So just thinking about art and how does it or how does it not feel inclusive? What art audiences is it for, or is it saying like this is no longer your space? So I would like to do one more Zoom Bloom and then go into a small group and come back. Does that work okay, Darcy? Yeah, okay. So the Zoom Bloom is, think of an instance where you felt welcome in a space or unwelcome, or maybe where a familiar space was reclaimed. So an example might be you go home for a visit and your bedroom's turned into a gym. So what might be the equivalent of that in space? Like, where have you noticed, either because of something that was up in the space that you felt welcome or unwelcome? And it could be art, or it could just be an example. So if folks could go ahead and do their Zoom Bloom, where you write in the chat, and gonna go ahead and share. You can go ahead and share with everyone your example of where you felt, because of something that you've seen, something that's in your environment or a piece of art, welcome or unwelcome. And then we'll go into small groups for you all to discuss. Yes, the news that's on in your family member's house, that's a great example. Basketball courts, STEM classes feeling unwelcome. Familiar spacing was reclaimed, coming home to my parents' house at the start of the beginning and beginning to start eating. We got someone back in. Local park that got turned into a water park or ice rink. Pride events feeling welcoming. Traveling to Kentucky this weekend to sport climb, felt unwelcome with Confederate flags. Wow, yeah, up on porches and as we pass by to climb. Tour of the city, with the internship supervisor, community gardens, people there, nice. They were super nice and fed with strawberries. Yes, that sounds very welcoming. Local parks with good seating, and another example, political signs in yards. Great. Excellent. So these are all great examples. So I'm going to go ahead and share. And I might be able to put you in groups now. Let me try. Without having to take it off share. There we go. Oh. All right, so I'm going to, you will all be invited to join a breakout room, and I want you to talk about this question about how have you felt welcome or unwelcome in a space given the environment. It could have been a piece of art or something that you noticed or a specific space. So what makes a place feel welcoming or unwelcoming? And Darcy, you can stay in the main room if you want to.
Okay.
Any thoughts, Darcy?
Yeah, I'm just gonna.
So I believe everyone is back. If folks share a little bit about your discussion, anything that was shared about what makes a space feel welcoming or unwelcoming. Nathan?
Yeah, something that I really enjoyed from our conversation was we kind of presented this idea of signifiers. So, you know, we have art as this idea of kind of like an installation that is fixed and is in no way kind of mobile, or oftentimes isn't mobile. And we were talking about signifiers in the way of like, you know, specific politicized shirts that people will wear, or kind of, is this person wearing a mask? Is this person not wearing a mask? And then like, how do we perceive this person? And then like, what is this person wearing on their mask? And so we were kind of talking about how like clear it is that individuals use these signifiers. You know, we were actually talking about kind of traveling to different areas. Molly was talking about like visiting family in North Carolina, and just kind of what that experience is like when you go to a new space, kind of when you're going to a space that you're less familiar with, though are connected to people there, kind of seeing those signifiers and what does that mean? And I was just talking about driving from Michigan to Kentucky this weekend and just looking at truck stops and seeing people wearing very intentional shirts and almost brandishing them at people that I think that they perceive as being different than them, just to express like, you know, these are my beliefs. You can see it on my t-shirt. You can see it on my maskless face. And just kind of looking at these signifiers and kind of relating them to art, and then the power of art to have its own signifier, be up, be an installation, be a physical piece, and just kind of communicate who is welcome and who the space belongs to.
Great, thank you. When you were saying about signifiers, one of the things that I remembered reading from the article I shared with all of you was one of the artists that came up in Detroit as a street artist and then became a muralist was sharing in the article how when he was painting in North Detroit, one of his murals, he knew he was painting himself out of his apartment. So just thinking about like what, yeah, like, and just being aware of where you are within the system. I think I like the idea of signifiers are just seen on people's t-shirts, or how do people know a community or who claims them or who they claim. Others?
I can share. Our group talked a lot about gendered spaces and all of us having experiences where we just felt unwelcome. And I think it's kind of hard to explain because technically you're like legitimately supposed to be welcome in every space. Like there's no exclusivity that's overt, but I think the vibe and then also just the attitudes that people have, like we talked about in sports. Like Hannah was talking about the tennis courts, Emily and I are talking about basketball courts, and also STEM classes. I think a lot of us have experienced a lot of hostility and just a lot of uncomfortable spaces that you can't really escape. But yeah, we talked about that. Oh yeah, and like Dari's in engineering, so like she shared about that a bit in those spaces. Yeah.
Thank you. I saw I think it was Josie's hand and then Pablo and Nico.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna add on with what Nathan and I and everyone in our group talked about. I just example to be honest of like my privilege and not realizing my privilege until I was like in the car already going on this trip. A bunch of my friends and I were going up north to a cabin my stepdad and mom have. And one of my best friends is Black. And up north in northern Michigan, we're talking a lot about Trump signs, like the grocery store that's near a cabin. I was saying it's like the small kind of gas station thing. It has like Please Lives Matter stuff and like very like, and I just dawned on me, like we were already like midway through our trip. I was like, I'm bringing my like Black best friend into a space that might not be like the safest space. And luckily everything was fine. And I think that was partly because we didn't really stop many places and we were just kind of in our little group. But yeah, I was just thinking a lot about that. And I like talked to him about it and he's like, oh, that's really like I love you for thinking of that. He wasn't really worried, but he also hadn't been to Michigan. He's from out of state. So I don't think he really knew like how like prevalent that culture is up there in northern like rural Michigan. So I was just thinking a lot about that. And yeah, like a space that's safe for me, it was not safe for my friends.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great example. Thank you. Pablo and Miko?
Our group talked about Ann Arbor and Michigan's campus, how it could be both like a welcoming and unwelcoming space at the same time. We talked about like just recognizing that Ann Arbor has like an affluent, like high socioeconomic status type city, and that like brings in a lot of those type of students. So like being in those type of spaces could be unwelcoming to some. And also just from personal experience, like even through Zoom and in-person classes, like sometimes being the only Hispanic student is just different. And like every class syllabus is like, oh, it's a welcoming space, blah, blah, blah. But even then at times it just feels different not seeing anyone else and like hearing other people's, thoughts and things. So yeah, that's just kind of where spaces seem welcoming, but then also just like being in those spaces is not welcoming.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think one of the great examples to me in Ann Arbor or at the university is like with every door, it used to be worse, but like with every door you would see like leaders and best, leaders and best, leaders and best. And this idea, like if you are being taught or have this constant narrative that you're better than everyone else, it's going to be really hard going back into your own community, or just feeling like is that directed towards me? When I went for my master's at University of Michigan, we did a climate change and environmental justice organizing conference. And we were inviting a number of folks that were environmental justice leaders. So these are like people of color coming into the University of Michigan. And it was like, it's a huge culture shock. And even having some of these conferences come into the University of Michigan or being at a university feels very uncomfortable because of all the things that you had just mentioned. Shandi?
Yeah, just going off what everyone said, just make you feel comfortable. I feel like, if people that's familiar with the area have a lot of conversation with you, offer like some people, like my group said, offering you food or offering you, a place to stay or, just basically make you feel comfortable just all around. That don't have to be, just certain things, but just talking to you, trying to get to know you. And, I feel like, as people, a lot of people talking to you, you'll start feeling more comfortable in the area.
Absolutely. What a great example of how to make people feel comfortable. I feel like that you brought up a lot of the principles of what makes a good organizing space or a good way to organize community. One of the folks that's on this mural is Charity Hicks, and I worked with her for a number of years, and she actually worked for East Michigan Environmental Action Council as the policy coordinator, while I was one of the co-directors. And we often talked about this idea of radical hospitality, which it really wasn't that radical. It's just like, how do you treat people well? Like making sure that people are taken care of, like recognizing that, you know, in community organizing, in environmental racism, environmental justice organizing, a lot of folks are battling every day. And like, how can we provide food, or how can we make people feel comfortable or provide a place to stay? And just adding some bit of self-care, some care for others or luxury into a space. And we often would try to incorporate that into the commons in Detroit. And that brings me to, you know, this mural that's up right now. I have mixed emotions about it. I have strong feelings about Charity Hicks. She was a really good friend of mine, and she was definitely a water warrior. And this, I feel like this mural that's in the Eastern Market is, it does martyrize her. And her funeral was really difficult for me to attend because it was so much about a celebration of her life, which is beautiful. But it was so many people that were celebrating her and talking about how great she was that I knew, like, when we were organizing, we're giving her such a hard time about what she should do, what she had to do. And I mean, it was just constant battles. And it always makes me think about how I want organizing to be a celebration of our life while we're living, and not like, because she died in the fight. Like she went to jail because she was like fighting for her neighbors when their water had been shut off, and it shouldn't have been. Like they got notices that it would be shut off in 60 days, and it was shut off the next day. And she was like, "This is wrong. This is wrong." And the police took her in and would not release her. And then she went to go speak about her experiences in New York, and she was run down in the, like she was hit by a motor vehicle. She was in a coma for a month. I mean, it was a rough period. And so she was also in ordained Orisha, and she was very much about African spirituality. So I also have really mixed feelings about this halo, which I associate with like the martyrs of Catholicism. So, but I love Sabrina Nelson. Like she's an amazing artist. I love her work. I understand the intent behind it, but I just have a lot of mixed emotions. Are there other folks that wanted to add about their group share? All right. One of the, in terms of like art and it being a use of how you can feel welcome or unwelcome in a space. So some of you may be familiar with Shepard Fairey. He's like a very famous street artist and muralist. And he did a huge mural in downtown Detroit that was commissioned. That was by the city and by Quicken Loans. So Duggan invited him, the mayor, and Duggan also fined him and charged him with over a decade felony for some of the uncommissioned art that he did in the city. Another example I will say is policy is making people feel welcome or unwelcome. For most of my life, I remember there not being meters in downtown Detroit or around Detroit. And that was very intentional by Mayor Coleman Young. And he stated, like, I am not going to find Detroiters. They're already, dealing with so much or up against so much that I'm not also adding these parking meters as a way to make money for the city. Like that didn't feel right to him. It was a principled stand. Whereas now you see meters everywhere, and there's some of the highest tickets. And that $45 ticket in a couple of days turns into a $100 ticket. You add a driver's responsibility fee to it, it's $250. That's a very clear way of using money to let folks know that they're not welcome in their own city. So those are some of my thoughts. And I think some of you have already gone around and checked out the Eastern Market murals and thought about art in other spaces. the background's no longer there, but the Rivera mural in the article that I shared, that was that was used as kind of like the beginning of art or some of this art movement in the city and how it was commissioned, but the art that was actually used in it was a huge critique of capitalism and of poor labor practices in the city of Detroit. Any questions or thoughts that folks would like to share? So this is, yeah, I appreciate all of your thoughts from your small groups and just anything that you have to share. Molly?
Yeah, I was just thinking about how, like, I remember in the article it mentions about Duggan and like, but how when you are like doing graffiti or you get charged for vandalism, that's a felony. And that can take away your right to vote. And I just think about how like, this is an expression of your voice. And then you express your voice, you get charged with a felony, and then you potentially lose the ability to vote for life, depending on where you live. I know this is like in Michigan, and I don't know how exactly it works here, but some states, if you are charged with a felony, you can never vote again. So I think too, that's just like very telling of how the city government and other places too, like view this expression of voices that are counter to the narratives that they want to tell. And so like, it is very much like a tool for the city government to commission people to paint what they want, but then they give a felony when they say things or paint things that are counter to what they don't want. And then they also can silence that voice for a very long time.
Absolutely. Yeah, fantastic point. Did Arushi have a hand up?
Yeah, I was debating while Molly was speaking if I should speak on this too, but I guess I can. It's more just like a general like pondering of thoughts in my head, but I'm working at Eastern Market as part of my community-based internship for a semester in Detroit, and I've definitely like from my end and talking with like my supervisor started to notice things about how like the market is placed in the community and like thoughts of like expansion and like who that affects, and it's definitely like a balance, and I don't know, I'm just thinking like, is it like, am I really like helping the community in regarding food systems and things like that if I'm like working for an organization that's not, while it has a lot of people who have different missions, like the people at the top who run it have like a very specific way they're like going about doing things that may not be like the best for the community around. So like, is that actually helpful or not? Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing that. And I can certainly speak to some of my thoughts, but I appreciate you kind of like the best you could putting out some of your thoughts, even if they don't feel fully formed. I feel like that's what a lot of what I do often in sharing like cognitive dissonance, or there's this and then there's that. And I think it's really important to think about or to start to understand what do you, by working with others, you start to shape what do you believe your how do you think change happens? Like, what's your own theory of change? And I feel like that is helpful. And I think that most people that are working there, absolutely, and there's some great examples too of how it is helpful to the community. Like their farmers market project is excellent, and at the same time, sometimes maybe it could be better for the community. So I think most people are acting in their own system or their own theory of change. And this at least helps you to wrestle with some of the ideas of how does change happen. And I feel like, that has been a lot of my experience as a community organizer, is constantly wrestling with, is this doing more good than harm, or is some of this harmful? And you know, there is so much that I believe is wrong with the nonprofit model. And there's so much that's wrong with the university model. I think what we're working for is, by wrestling with this idea, is like, well, what would be something that could work for the liberation of all? Like, we have to demand and ask those questions, but at the same time, like, ask those questions thinking systemically without harming each other. I think that can be hard because you don't want to necessarily point a finger at them, because for the most part, they're probably, I'm guessing, I don't know, but I think that they believe, or they're working for the best, with the best intentions in mind. But I would say it definitely is going to help with you understanding, how do you believe change happens, or how do you think it should happen? Darcy, do you want to add anything to that? But I appreciate that thought, and thank you so much for sharing it, because I wrestle with that all the time.
I think, no, I don't feel like there's anything I need to add to that. I mean, I think this is a fabulous conversation, and what I'm sort of inspired by in listening to everyone so far is the importance. I mean, Diana, what I think you're calling cognitive dissonance, which again, what I like about that phrase is I feel like cognitive dissonance places it like personally within us, right? And it holds ourselves accountable in ways. I also see that connection to like just complexity, right? So holding all sorts of tensions and contradictions at once. I feel like this is at the heart of what draws me to art. And I mean that in the most general sense, from like me getting a degree in English, right? And reading and loving literature and being a poet. I mean, it's that ability to hold multiple things and not resolve them, right? That is just mind blowing. So I think just hearing you, Diana, talk through like this mural that we're looking at right now, right? And the ways in which it is both an honor, a way of sharing who Charity is, and exploring this and celebrating her at the same time as it can be deeply troubling, right? And problematic about how it's represented and how she might feel about it. And that those things don't have to be like fixed, right? It's not one or the other, but it's the ways in which we wrestle with them both at once. I think as someone who loves the arts and is committed to the arts and teaches about the arts, like to me, that's kind of the core. And I hear that in Arushi and what you're saying too, even though you're talking about like a work environment, right? That I think those same things are true, is how do we hold these tensions in our lives and act on them with integrity and authenticity. So yeah, I think that's the only thing I would add, but I'm happy to like segue into thinking about the poem, but Diana, please, I want to leave space for anything else that you have as part of your presentation.
That was pretty much it. Just let me aware of time too. So thanks, Darcy.
Yeah, of course, of course. Thank you. So here's what I suggest, if it's okay, folks. Why don't we take 5 minutes and just get away from a screen. And then we'll come back and we'll just talk about some poems for a little bit. And then we can wrap it up with, so my group, we often end with a meditation. And so I want to invite everybody that I'm going to offer that today. If you'd like to stick around for that, you can. And if not, that's totally fine too. But we'll talk a little bit about a poem and then we'll sign off. But why don't we take 5 for right now and go stretch, close your eyes, yell, whatever you need to do, move your bodies, and we'll come back. So it's 11:25. See y'all at 11:30. I've put, oh, thank you. Thank you. I've put the PDF in the chat. So let me know if you have any trouble opening that. So if you could pull that up, then we can all kind of be on the same page. So what I'm hoping to do is just read it once now as a whole big group. And then we'll move into breakout groups. And I have some questions for us to think about this poem. If you didn't notice, I do want to draw attention to the fact that the third figure in the mural that Diana had up as she was concluding her presentation was Jessica Caramore, the poet whose work we're going to talk about today. And so I want to kind of take this spirit and energy of complexity into this next discussion, and just thinking about However familiar or unfamiliar talking about poetry is for you, that I welcome that, right? I think poetry is one of those topics that people are like, I love this, or I hate this. It makes me feel really uncomfortable. And sometimes both at the same time. So just know that what I'm most interested in this conversation are the things that you notice. There's no right way to engage with this work, isn't the same way that there's no right way to engage with art at all, right? So what I want to start to do, if it's okay, is read through this poem. And if someone really wants to read the whole thing, I absolutely welcome that. But I'm also fine if folks want to volunteer to read just a little bit, and then, you know, we can shift to the next person. But I think it's kind of nice to just hear folks' voices. So is anybody having trouble opening the poem? Okay. So is there somebody who's willing to, and sorry, as I'm moving along, I'm realizing I have to find it in my book. So I'll do that while we start. But is somebody willing to start us off and or take us through the whole thing? That's fine too.
I can read the first few paragraphs.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Natalie.
What will they name us after we lie our bodies across the east and west side divide that swerves with Motown myth and low ride grips down 7 miles of nowhere to go streets? Gotta get my degree, my car, my house, my man, my life together. But today I gotta bury him again. Pretend I don't know them friends. Mom wants to know why nice girls pin up Michigan's Most Wanted on the fridge under the yellow butterfly magnets.
Thanks, Natalie. Somebody else?
I can read part of it.
Okay, thanks, Eva.
Match the curtains, match the description. We've dented car hoods with imaginary high heels. During Piston playoffs, our daddies play golf. Bad boys were good old days. Sometimes pissing outside was okay. The Applejack used to slip down with ignorant ice, rolling after hour red dice with somebody else's money. Suicide ruins the joy rides of drive-by blood smeared. On our front porches, we simply keep brothers alive. Silent, sexy torches.
Anybody else can just step right on in.
Can go. Blowing fire into existence, inhaling bulletproof wind, ready for verbal war or a country cuss word. World news calls us a ghost town till I walk among old eyes, pouring Southern comfort on truck stop pancakes that play numbers, 60s riots, still burned down homes in 1999, boarded up ashes, fire and black bottom dreams, committed suicide a long time ago. I see Malcolm walking Woodward, Martin and Hart Plaza, and they don't recognize his chocolate city anymore. I've watched tears crawl back into eye sockets without any time to cry. We pray this time we won't die when the club lets out, holding long kisses, wishing we could tongue down any man who's gentle or recognizes the feminine underneath the west side. Somehow see my 7-mile switch is graceful. Never say goodbye to my cousin Lynn, smiling back, black spirit child, got African drums under her white feet. Strong heart screams, lit up 24-hour Coney Island parking lot. Your Sicilian French blood was safe with me. I could protect you because I was down with brothers from East Side who drove Monte Carlos with tinted windows or an Impala with a 350 engine we built in the backyard.
Thanks, Molly. Somebody else?
I can take the next part. Almost took you and Nikki out with ego-crushed bullets, entering at close range to the driver's side windows. This is a night for nice girls with chicken-winged wishbones in their pockets, wringing out dirty water from grounded clouds that fog our forever, burning night smoke out of lovesick lungs.
Thanks, Arishi. Washing our feet with homegirl holy water, store owners speak Arabic in our ears that smell of green meat and month-old bread repackaged and resold to our intelligence. Sticking bright neon orange 3 for $1 signs on our heads, another one of my boys is shot dead. for stealing a 5-cent tangy taffy. We are lawyers, journalists, business executives, poets, philosophers, activists, hypocrites, and confused. Intelligent hoodlums who hide dime bags in sweat socks, high off the scent of new shoes, Cadillac cars, and men who dress better than we do, conscious of everything. Believers in fast-paced dreams, we Detroit, we Sistas, we Rosa, we protest, we laugh, we Belle Isle, we Supreme, we wonder, we Smoky, we booty-shaking music, we Midwest flavor, we country. We lay face down on warm cement, pretending not to run after buses, waving our transfers in the air, hoping they will take us where we think we've always wanted to go. Detroit girls wait for the black sun rising to turn young, hot coals back to diamonds. All right. So we've heard it once. What I'd like for you to do, and I'm going to post some questions in the chat that you can access during your breakout rooms, but my group has been kind of following this, what I call a kind of method of reading poetry. And so what I'd like you to do is in that the first 5 minutes in your group, will probably take about 15 to 20 minutes in groups. So take that first 5 minutes to, first of all, read it again in your group. You may be like, well, we just read it and we don't have that much time, but hear it again. I think hearing it and hearing different people's voices, something will always stand out to you. So read it again, and then take the next few minutes after that to just try to figure out what's happening here, right? We sometimes call this a paraphrase. You don't need to worry about what it means or what the symbolism is or what we're supposed to take away from it yet, but just how do you say what's actually happening, do you think? Like in the world of this poem, what is happening? And then I think from there, you can jump into what are the types of things that you notice. One of the sort of metaphors I use in my class to talk about art is almost like I say it's thinking like an engineer kind of, but like what pieces make this up? How do those pieces come together to make something happen? So you might think about that a little bit too. I'm going to put all those questions in the chat. Just give me 1 second. All right. Pop this in here. Okay. And then what we'll do, after that 15, 20 minutes of conversation, we'll just come back and share back out. I'm going to go ahead and say 15, even though the poet in me wants to be like, we need 40 minutes to talk about it. But I want us to have enough time for the share out, and I don't want to take y'all too long past noonish. So any questions before I move us into breakout rooms? Okay, so let me do that.
Do you want me to put the breakout rooms?
Oh, actually, sure. If you don't mind, Diana, since you've got them.
Yep. So you'll be in your same group.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks.
I'll see an invitation now.
It's about everybody. Thank you, Diana. So what did you notice? I'm interested in hearing what kinds of things stood out to you about what's happening in this poem.
Well, within our group, one of the first things we talked about was Nathan brought up the concept of like the title in relation to the rest of the piece. And the way that like the title really does summarize a lot of the stance of like this poem. And more specifically how it explores like the way one views like the city in comparison to like the heart and passion within it, and also with like people as well. I'm gonna say, I believe it was like Molly who made like the assumption of being under pressure is what creates diamonds. And you look at Detroit, which is a city that's been under like constant and consistent pressure. And there's diamonds that have formed, but from an outside perspective, it could still be viewed as just black holes. And that was really like one of the main points that we hit on.
Yeah. It's super insightful and interesting to think about that whole process, right? The process of like the pressure making something happen. Yeah. And how we view that end result. Yeah. Other folks.
Yeah, something that my group talked about a lot is, well, we kind of were almost questioning it, is like, who's the audience of this piece? Like, who is the audience supposed to be? Because we kind of discussed how some parts of the poem more was, it almost maybe seemed like it was from like men's perspectives in her life, and then some of it was from her perspective. And so we were wondering, like, who is this piece made for? What are we supposed to interpret it as? And yeah.
Can I ask a kind of follow-up question on that? Because I think this is such an important question of like, who is art for? Who's speaking? Who's not speaking? Who's an audience? Who's intended an audience? Who maybe isn't intended? Can anybody in the group, Natalie, I don't mean to be putting you on the spot, talk a little bit more about these places where you feel like maybe you are hearing a kind of male perspective or, some sort of gendered perspective? Can you like point out spaces in the poem where you see that, particular words or phrases or lines?
Yeah, I can go, but does somebody else in my group want to go? If not, okay, I can go. So for example, like at the end, it's like, we Detroit, we sisters. So Moore is kind of talking about like sisters there, but then at the beginning of the poem, Moore says, we simply keep brothers alive. So, just like this idea of brothers versus sisters, and then more references, Malcolm, Martin, family members. I'm trying to think of where else we were talking about this, perspective. Yeah, I think those are a few examples.
Yeah, thank you. That's really helpful to actually look at like those specific images, right? Like this is one of the things I think is fabulous about poetry, but we usually don't have a lot of space. And so the things that are there are really important. And so, yeah, that's helpful. Thank you. Arushi, yeah.
Oh, yeah, I just want to follow up with what, I think it was Natalie. Yeah. What she just said. We also pointed out the lines on the first page. During Piston playoffs, our daddies play golf. Bad boys were the good old days, which it was kind of interesting because like golf is definitely more of like a sport for like affluent white families, which I, considering that Detroit is like a majority Black city, like that also made us think like who is the perspective that the poem is from and like how it changes to kind of encapsulate like different perspectives of the city, because of course it's not just like one experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Kate and or Anya.
Yeah, one thing we were kind of talking about that touches on, I think, especially what Molly said about diamonds being formed under pressure. One kind of theme we noticed was expectations in this poem, like not only kind of external expectations about your life, like an individual life, and then also about Detroit and, fitting a certain description. And I think like the line, gotta get my degree, my car, my house, my man, is kind of like that description of success, especially through like a male-centered white lens, and how that like complicates this whole poem, I think. But then also this idea of like diamonds being formed under pressure. We talked about how it feels kind of like a toxic success, I don't know, like a toxic productivity narrative where it's like, oh, the best things come out of like the most high stress situations. And it feels kind of like an anti-self-care, anti-community care, like, I don't know, narrative or piece, which is just, I don't know, interesting, and like how that ties into like external expectations of a community, and maybe those expectations don't fit what the community or what the individual needs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's really, really important perspective and complexity you're bringing here. Attention, right? Is that like, we also can't talk about diamonds without thinking about the toxicity and brutality of like the diamond industry, right? And again, images are deliberate, right? We could think of a different kind of image, right? Where something is because of its experiences transforming into something else. A lotus flower, let's say, right? Which, many folks know this idea that you can't have a lotus without mud. That might be another image that could express this idea, but it's not the one we get, right? We have black coals and diamond hearts. So, I think that's really important to kind of bring in that piece too, of like what I hear you saying, Kate, about sort of what notions of success, whose notions, right? It reminds me of Diana's question of like, whose territory is this, right? Like, where are these ideas coming from? Where's the pressure coming from, right? And yeah, what is it like to live within that? Yeah. And that, sorry, I keep going on, but like that kind of tension between resistance and resentment about those structural sort of situation and this resilience and like empowerment within celebrating survival and life. And I think there's so much of that tension in this poem. Yeah. Other folks. Oh, Jesse, sorry.
So one thing I also noticed about this piece is there's like a lot of juxtaposition just within the title and like the lines themselves. I feel like when the narrator starts, it's very much centered towards like an audience that's like a welcoming, kind of inviting line, like the word, using the word us, but it specifically focuses, I think, on like the concept of youth and identity and the way that one navigates it as they grow older. You can kind of see that like some of the other lines aren't so, I wouldn't say gendered, but it's just bad boys were the good old days. Sometimes pissing outside was okay. The Applejack used to slip down with ignorant ice. That's like teen years, kind of like growing up is the way I interpreted that. Like community, it didn't really matter whether they're brothers or sisters. But as you get older, you can see a stronger like gender divide. There's a lot of language that specifically is like female oriented. And I think it's interesting that it like walks the tightrope of like developing an identity and trying to better oneself while also living up to the expectations of like the outside.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't want to cut anybody else off, but okay. So I have a question that gets, I think, at part of what Jesse was getting at, that so my group submitted discussion questions prior to this session. And one of the questions that someone raised, and I apologize, I cannot remember who it was, so feel free to like take credit when I say this, but this idea of seeing intersectionality in this poem, this notion of like how different aspects of our identities and our ways of being in the world impact our experience in the world, right? And so I wonder, where do people see this idea? Because that's part of what I hear in Jesse's comment now. How might we see, like, let's say, a testimony to what a version of a Black female experience might be in the world, that intersectional complexity? Do folks see this in places in the poem? And particularly you who submitted this question, what might you have had in mind about seeing this idea of intersectionality in the poem?
I kind of see intersectionality of class because there are a lot of narratives of, well, just like Detroit being a poor city, or like there's a lot of poverty and like discomfort in the way that people live. But at the same time, it's like we are lawyers, journalists, business executives, poets, philosophers, activists. So it's kind of like this intersectionality of class where sometimes people grow up in certain situations, but they still, it doesn't mean that every like person living in Detroit is poor, or that every Black person is poor. So like that kind of nuance and like different perspectives of even just one person could live all of those experiences throughout their life. I thought that that was interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, thanks, Miku. I think that's a really good example. Other folks, and you don't have to be answering my question, what else did people notice or talk about in your groups about the poem and how it works? And so, like, I'm really aware of time, right? And how long we've all been on here, but I guess I do want to ask one more question before we move into the meditation, which is this idea of witnessing. I hope some folks at least had a chance to talk about this in your groups, but like, what does it mean to witness? And do you see the poet here, the speaker of the poem, as witnessing in some way? And if so, how?
Sorry to talk a lot. I see like witnessing as kind of in a way that leads to the development of like identity. Because you see factors of them talking about like losing their friends who got shot over just like a 5-cent piece of taffy. But you also can see that they're lawyers, journalists, business executives, activists. So, and then they go on to be people who listen to booty shaking music. Identity knows like no bounds. And I think that the way that this piece like navigates that is very interesting, and that it's all formed from the perspective of being a witness to the events that happen around you, to being a witness to the things that are very actively happening to you, and sharing that perspective.
Yeah, thank you, Jesse. That's really, really well put. Yeah, Nathan, I noticed you had a hand too.
Sure, yeah. Something that we talked about in group, and Jesse and I are in the same group, is this poem functioning as a testament. And witnesses testify. What they do is they express their experience, they express what they've seen, and they do so to provide a better understanding. And I very much perceive the poem to be doing that. It's a testament to the reality that this person faces, this concept of having an appearance on the outside despite having something perceived as greater value within. And some of the lines that I think really communicate that are just something that Josie actually pointed out in our group, which was the idea of what will they name us? So, just the idea, the witness is now stating like, I'm going to provide my testament, my testimony, my reality, my truth. And I'm going to start it with the question of how will it be perceived? How will we be perceived once we move on, whether that's death or whether that's an experience in a different neighborhood? And so in my mind, I tie that into the concept of witnessing, because it is a testament.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And this idea, as you so aptly put it, right, of this question, we're starting out with what will they name us, right? Not what will we name us? What will they name us? How, in some ways, will this be perceived? And particularly coming after this little epigram at the beginning that lists for Charlotte, Lynn, Trey, Angie, Alexis, Nikki, and all my Detroit dogs, right? We're starting with names. And then our next line is, what will they name us, right? How might, I kind of hear this echoed as like, how might reality then be taken over, right? And be perceived in a different way, or sorry, mama brain, sorry. Like, how will that be taken from us, right? Yeah, absolutely. I'll rest there. Anything else that you notice about the poem, or witnessing, or just final thoughts to share in these few moments? Okay. So what I'd like to do is we'll just end with a meditation. This is, I think, about 7 minutes, so just under 10 minutes. And like I said, if you're down for that, awesome. If you're not, that's okay too. What we tend to do is just turn cameras off so that you don't have to, you can do what you need to in your own space, though I realize that many of you are in shared space. And then what we'll do is we'll come back at the end if there were any kind of final thoughts or questions or anything that arose during that time. You're welcome to share. And if not, we will sign off and share our gratitude with one another for this time together. But do what you need to do if this isn't in the cards for you today. And know, actually, what I can try to do, I always post my agendas on Canvas. I can actually, Diana, you have it. If anybody wants the link, it is in the agenda that I created for today. So if you want access to this particular meditation, just know that we can make sure you get that too. Any questions before we move into that? Okay. All right.